lovelies. Welcome back to my channel. Long time no see, because I just can't do a regular filming schedule, apparently. So the good news is that I'm finished with my thesis, and I'm just waiting for my defense on April 18th. The bad news is that I didn't get the interviews that I wanted to get done, just people's schedules didn't match up. It's fine, it happens. So I'm gonna try to jump right back into April, give you guys some content, and I have a really cool announcement at the end of this video. I'm so sorry. If you're new to my channel, my name is Isa, and I am a second-year graduate student about to graduate with my master's in communication studies with a focus in disability, culture, and identity. So on this channel, I kind of talk about my disabled identity, my research. I talk about just pretty much everything that I can think of with disability that I might think is helpful for you guys. So if you ever have questions, feel free to leave them down below. Today, I wanted to talk about Cyrano, the movie with Peter Dinklage. I have some thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. Okay, so quick disclaimer, there are going to be spoilers in this video, and also I know that it's based off of a play. I'll talk a little bit about the play, especially when I'm talking about the plot, to kind of give you an idea. However, I don't care. These criticisms are very self-indulgent. Please don't get into my comments and be like, but that's not how the play is, and I don't care. I don't care, because we're just going to be talking about the movie, except for when I use the play to explain the movie a little bit. Anyway, let's jump in to what is Cyrano. So Cyrano is about this guy who is played by Peter Dinklage. So Peter Dinklage is the same guy who played Tyrion in Game of Thrones. Cyrano is this poet, captain of the guard of some, it's like period France kind of. I don't really understand exactly what period it's supposed to be. I think it's, no, I'm not even gonna say it because I know that it's gonna be wrong. Anyway, it's supposed to be very much like alternative universe. It was very artsy. But the point is, Cyrano is this poet, and he's got this fancy brain, and he's also got this fancy sword, and he's good with both. And his big issue is the fact in the play that he has this big nose, and he's supposed to be super ugly, which is where we get into the first problem, but we'll jump into that in a minute. So Cyrano is in love with his childhood best friend, Roxanne. Roxanne comes to him and is like, hey, I have something I want to tell you. And he's like, oh, she's going to tell me that she's in love with me. And turns out, no, that she actually fell in love with one of the people who works, that he's like the captain over, because he's handsome. And of course, Cyrano's devastated, which is super sad. And so the premise of the movie is that Cyrano, because he can't love Roxanne himself, is like, oh, I'm going to make Roxanne happy by having this kid. I'm going to write letters for this kid who is very pretty, somewhat okay with a sword, and not the greatest brain, not the poet brain. He doesn't have the poet brain. And so Cyrano proceeds to romance Roxanne through these letters, but saying that they are from this boy, the pretty boy. I don't remember his name. It doesn't matter. He's just pretty boy. And that's the premise of this movie. And I thought, I had hope that it was going to be like, oh, here's this interesting thing, kind of problematic in a plot. But I was really hoping that it was like, oh, she's going to realize that it's Cyrano, and there's going to be some conflict of why did you lie to me? And then you're going to deal with the fact that Roxanne, some of the things that you said are kind of ableist and made me feel like shit that I couldn't talk to you. And then she'd be like, oh my gosh, we're both in the wrong here. We're in love. This is awesome. Friends to lovers is one of my favorite tropes, but that is not the case from this movie. So let's jump into my actual listed critiques, because we'll get into all of that. So first off is the fact that they call Peter Dinklage ugly, because the whole point of Cyrano is that he's supposed to be ugly. And that is he is not an unattractive man. Have you seen him? So why are we saying that he's ugly? And the point is, in the play, I guess it was supposed to be this big nose, so, you know, very much of like not pretty, which I just had realization with the big nose. Yeah, whatever. The whole thing is problematic. But yeah, he's very ugly is the whole point of the play. But instead, you can't pretend that Peter Dinklage is ugly. You really can't. And so there's a lot of these like ableism that they put in instead. And they're just like, oh, you're so na-na-na, and you're not handsome like him. And he's like, I'm not handsome like him. And it's just, there's a certain amount of like lacking of confidence in your body and experience in life when everybody is like, oh, you're not attractive as a potential partner, that I kind of get with Cyrano repeating and stuff, and like seeing that he is a good potential partner for Roxanne or whatever. However, it's just the fact that they kept trying to say that Peter Dinklage was ugly really bothered me. Why are we doing that? Ew. And this is where we get into the big problem of my hope, and where the hope was completely broken, because I thought going into this and seeing the trailers, like I was super excited because we never get, you know, disabled romantic leads, and I was like, yes, this is awesome. I should have researched it a little bit more before so I wouldn't have been so hurt. But I was like, yes, I think what's going to happen is that, and I think I talked about this already in the video, I can't remember, but whatever, I'm going to repeat myself, is that Pretty Boy is going to be like, oh, you're actually in love with her, so I'm in love with her from a distance, but I don't actually know her, and she doesn't actually know me, she knows you, and so I'm going to help you, like, get the confidence to actually, like, talk to her about this and kind of play matchmaker a little bit. And that's not what happened. Pretty Boy and Roxanne get married. Cyrano's just standing there, and Roxanne is like, Cyrano, go hold off my fiance and I'm like, so she can get married to Pretty Boy. And it was just sad, and it didn't make sense. Like, really didn't make sense of like why Cyrano was doing all this stuff. And then there was the fiance who's like evil, and he has this whole I'm a bad guy song about how he's about to go marry Roxanne, and how like there's just all of this stuff about how he possesses her and all this other stuff. And he shows up and he finds her married to Pretty Boy, and he's like, oh, this makes me angry and I'm gonna send Pretty Boy off to the war. But it didn't match the tone. It really sounded like he meant violence, which I technically think sending someone to the war would be violent, but it just didn't. It was like there's this big buildup, and he finds out that he got married, or she got married already, because that was a whole plot point. And then he was like, man, now I'm gonna get my revenge through social power. It was just weird. So even though I was sitting there through the whole movie, and my mom got annoyed with my commentary, but the movie kind of goes back and forth of like, oh, well, maybe Pretty Boy's gonna figure it out. Maybe Pretty Boy's gonna figure it out, and Pretty Boy's gonna be like, hey, Cyrano, you need to actually tell Roxanne that this isn't fair to her, that either of us are doing this to her, and like she should decide for herself, give her agency back, I guess. And they do have a conversation like that, but only when Pretty Boy dies, which didn't make sense, because Pretty Boy is like, oh, I didn't realize that you loved my wife until they got married and he got sent off to war immediately. But he's like, I didn't realize you loved her until I found out that you wrote her a letter every day and you were putting it in my voice, which is really not good. But the thing that gets me is like, that's what it took to realize, like, Cyrano risks his life every single day to get a letter to Roxanne while he's at war. That's what it took and it wasn't even that action, it was just this conversation that they had in passing, to realize that Cyrano was in love, is that there's this whole scene that was actually really, really kind of cute. And I thought, when I was like, oh, well, maybe this movie is going to redeem itself at this point, is that Pretty Boy meets Roxanne in person, and Pretty Boy doesn't have the pretty brain that Cyrano has, and he doesn't know how to use words the way that Roxanne wants, and so she gets upset with him, justifiably. And so there's this moment where, like, Pretty Boy comes to talk to Roxanne, and so then we get the classic trope of, like, I'm going to tell you what to say, and you need to say it, and it goes just terrible. And so then all of a sudden Cyrano starts talking for my dude Pretty Boy, and like has this whole thing where he just kind of takes over the conversation and is just talking about how much he loves Roxanne, and like walks up to her window almost, and it doesn't even make sense because like the way the sound works, because Pretty Boy's standing over here and Cyrano's walking up from this direction. Roxanne's at the tower like, oh, Pretty Boy's so smart and he's just nervous and he's got anxiety. And you're just, I'm just at least thinking, like, Pretty Boy keeps making eyes at Cyrano like, oh, dang. At least what I was thinking is like, oh, dang, I'm never going to be that smart. And maybe this isn't a great pairing. Maybe I just thought she was pretty and I hoped that she thought I was pretty. But you can't have a relationship on mutual prettiness when it comes to somebody who really needs someone who, like, meets the intellectual level or whatever. I don't know. This movie frustrates me so much. The point is that Pretty Boy didn't figure it out, which there's so many obvious things there. And overall, what happened is Pretty Boy dies at war, which is sad. And I'm just like, I don't quite understand it, but I was like, at least Cyrano and Roxanne have to get together at this point. Like, yeah, there's some tragedy, yeah, there's some lies, but you know, this is a dumb period drama. Maybe this is what it takes to get them together. And it's their mutual fondness for Pretty Boy that, like, finally brings them together, which is very sad and tragic. But no, that would be too easy. That would be too easy and still problematic. But yeah, no, because we gotta remember, Peter Dinklage is disabled, and disabled characters don't get happy endings. So fast forward several years past the war, and turns out Cyrano is like writing these letters, and he keeps writing and writing and writing, I guess to Roxanne. I didn't really figure that part out. But he's old and he's sick, and you think he might die in the street, but he didn't die in the street, and he goes up to this like church that Roxanne kind of works at, and apparently they have conversations every day, and she's like, what's the news? And he tells her the news, and then that's when he decides to reveal to her, because the last letter, she's like, oh, I haven't told you what the last letter of Pretty Boy was. And Cyrano's like, here, let me read it. Or Cyrano asked for it. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Cyrano asked for the last letter Pretty Boy wrote, which was Cyrano's own words, and he starts reading it, and then he starts reading it from memory. And so then Roxanne figures it out, and she gets all hurt, but it's okay because Cyrano is dying. He literally falls and dies. And then they have this really awkward duet on the ground as he's dying, and they try to blame it on Cyrano. She's like, if only you had told me. And he's like, it was my pride. Literally this whole time, this whole movie is riddled with ableism. Everyone's telling, like, Cyrano, you're not good enough, you're bad, you're not even good enough to be in society, and Cyrano has to constantly be better than everybody else, and it's just so frustrating it wasn't his pride. And yes, there was some elements of pride, but that doesn't mean that everybody else is excused, especially Roxanne, who made a big deal about how pretty Pretty Boy was, and that's the reason why she was in love with him. Because it was love at first sight. And that's supposed to be the tragedy of it, I guess, is that it was his pride. I don't know how the play ends with that note, but it bothered me a lot. And then what really bothered me is the fact that Cyrano died. I literally started this movie making a joke to my mom going, haha, if Cyrano dies, I'm going to, leave. I'm gonna be so mad. And by the first scene, it sets it up where there is the parallel kind of thing where you're just like, this is going to be important for later, and I think he's going to die. He's most definitely going to die. And why does the disabled character have to die? And I get that the play was not supposed to be about a disabled character, that they just made this character who is supposed to be ugly disabled, and that stands in for the disability. I do think there might have been some potential there, but they would have had to change several key plot points in order to do it well for a true, to not just be ableist. Like, it's okay to talk about ableism. It's okay to have ableism in a movie, and have that as a component of plot. But why are we not recognizing it and not kind of building that into the arc, rather than like, yeah, the world is ableist, but it's all Cyrano's fault, and now he's dead, and isn't it sad? I am 100% tired of killing disabled main characters, especially when they are characters, not even just characters, but like, it's so rare that we get movies that are played by actors with disabilities. And it's just so frustrating that I thought this was going to be a romance movie and like true, genuine romance. And there really wasn't any true, genuine romance built, because the whole time Cyrano's pretending to be somebody else, and he's not being accepted for who he is, and he's not accepting himself for who he is. And the pride thing is more about Roxanne than his own belief of himself and his own view of himself. And it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I was literally in a bad mood for the whole night and the next day after watching this movie, because I was so distraught by just how it played out. And when I talked to someone about it, they're like, oh, well, it's a movie for able-bodied people. Like, it's gonna play onto some of those tropes, which may be true, but I kind of just feel like I really want a movie about people with disabilities, with characters with disabilities, to be at least made for that population. Be like, here is this genuine love story, and it just happens to have disabled characters. So those are my thoughts on Cyrano. They are slightly incoherent, and that's my rant. But anyway, if you want more rants like this and more insight to my soupy brain, because it's literally grad school life is just soup for brain soup for brain. You would like to see more content where I go on tangents and rants and explain my opinions on things as a disabled person and someone who studies critical disability perspectives, feel free to like and subscribe. Also, if you would like to see a person with a disability go to the Disney College program, stick around, because I got accepted into the Disney College program. So I will be starting May 23rd, and not that this channel is, I'm hoping not to make this channel entirely Disney, but I do have my spring break video that I'm going to be coming out with. I think it's going to be in 2 parts over the month of April. But yeah, I got into the Disney College program, so I'll be talking about that more. If you have any questions about that, feel free to leave them down below. Just trying to figure out the world, and anyway, I'll see you real soon, and leave any questions you have down below about any of the stuff that's going on. Bye!